the question is, what do we mean by evaluating teaching? And I suppose the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is teaching for? Teaching is one of the means by which we hope to encourage other people to learn and get better understandings of themselves, others, and the world around them. So when we talk about evaluating teaching, we're looking at the success that that method or those methods have in achieving those ends. Now, when I mention ends, we need to be clear about what the ends of teaching and other forms of learning are. There's lots of ways we can categorise that, but let's think about three different elements. One is what I'd call reproduction, the second is what I'd call production, and the third is what I'd call transformation. So with reproduction, we're testing the extent to which somebody is able to remember a canon or a body of knowledge that's been developed in the past by researchers. This is often the basic form that people focus on in teaching. When I talk about production, I mean enabling people to be effective as researchers or as workers or as citizens themselves once they've been through that educational process. What are we looking at there is their ability not only to describe things that have been done in the past, but to analyse, to evaluate, to synthesise and to generate new knowledge. So that's the production mentality. The transformation mentality is about getting people to have a better understanding of themselves and their place in the world with regard to other people and the world around them. That takes us into ethical dimensions of practice as well, and encourages us to think about deeper understandings and philosophical underpinnings of knowledge. So I would say that in teaching we're aiming to do elements of those three things at different points in an undergraduate or postgraduate's journey through the institution. And when we're coming to evaluate teaching, we're seeking to see the extent to which staff and others have been successful in aiding those processes. So the second question is, why is the evaluation of teaching so important? Well, what I think I said in the first question was that there's lots of different ways in which people can learn. People can learn from themselves, they can learn from books, they can learn from computers, television, from going and taking part in social activities and work-related events. Teaching is just one of the very many ways in which people can be encouraged to learn. So it needs to be assessed to determine whether it's effective and whether it's aiding learning more effectively than other forms of learning. This is particularly important because all of these activities have costs. They have costs for people in terms of money, the cost of the actual activity, but they also have opportunity costs. There are things that people could be doing instead. We know from work that's been done in the United States that some forms of teaching does not improve learning, does not improve people's ability to be effective workers in the future, and doesn't improve their own self-understanding. So questions need to be asked about what does do that and how can that be encouraged and less effective forms discouraged. The last of the three questions is, how can we evaluate teaching? Just say a little bit about how we evaluate learning. If we go back to the threefold distinction before, if it's production, then it would be about the extent to which somebody was able to remember facts. If it was reproduction, it would be about the extent to which they were able to remember facts. If it was production, it would be about the abilities to analyse, to evaluate, to generate new knowledge. And if it's about transformation, it's about changes in fundamental understandings of the self and your place in the world. Now, we have methods of assessing those through examinations and assignments, but do we really ever clearly think about how we're helping students to do that in the precious time we have with them in lectures and in tutorials and in seminars? We can do that by critically self-reflecting, by using concepts and categories like those that I've just introduced to you to think about what we're doing. But sometimes maybe we're not self-critical enough. Maybe we can benefit from working with others, working with colleagues, with mentors, with buddies or professional support workers, people from the academic development unit, to observe our teaching and reflect back to us what they felt we were doing during those sessions. My own experiences of peer observation suggest to me it's not just a benefit to the person being observed, it's also extremely beneficial to the person observing, because in the process of observing you begin to ask questions not only about the practice that you're looking at, but also about your own practice and what you're doing outside of those observation sessions. To further take things on, particularly in a world where there are so many other ways in which people can learn and improve their understandings, it's important that we're all engaged in our own continuous professional development and that we're all engaged in our own professional updating and research. That research can be related to the subject, to knowledge, to new forms of production. It may be more pedagogic in orientation and focus on how we can encourage people to have different understandings of themselves and their place in the world. The last thing for me is a challenge for you, and really what I'd like to do is give you two challenges. The first challenge is to reflect more critically on your own support of others in their learning. What could you be doing that would help them to learn better? What is it that you've learned on the PGCAP or through other engagement with the literature on learning and teaching that would help you to make that practice better? That's my first challenge. The second challenge is more practical, and that is, can you tell me what you could do outside of the classroom, outside of the lecture, outside of the studio or outside of the laboratory that would help students to learn and connect with the world outside, to give them a better understanding of how these skills we help them develop could be applied in the workplace and how they may be applied during their life course, how they might help them get a better understanding of themselves and their place in the world.